Morant blows by Primo. Attack!
Jokic into Paolo. Here it goes. Got it. Denver has won.
But that's my stubborn side. Like, it's easy to go somewhere and go win a championship with somebody else. It's easy. But this is the hard way to do it, and we did it.
We welcome you in to the Small Ball Podcast alongside Trevor Mikulin. I'm Scott Ayers. Our good friend Christian Dennis is out with some sickness. Producer Andy is gone. This is a bonus episode here, and to be completely honest with you...
Tell him, Scott, what happened.
Yeah, we had some audio issues on our last show, and we still might put out some of that content on YouTube because there was a lot of fun stuff that we talked about, but we figured that we want to do best by our listeners and by, honestly, our quality, and that was to record a bonus show to talk about another team, a part of this series that we're doing throughout the summer, where we're covering every small to mid-market team, which has been really fun so far.
A tour, if you will, through the NBA.
Yeah, we are on a tour. Imagine a little bus. The wheels on the bus go round and round.
Yes, they do.
And this bus...
Where are we stopping next, Scott?
We're stopping in Orlando. Ooh. Hope you brought your flip-flops, some sunglasses, and a towel because you're going to be sweating down in Orlando during this humidity. But this is a really fun and young team that we are really excited to talk about. And this is a team that had the number one pick in the NBA draft, and we will cover that. But first, let's kind of look into Orlando's season last year, where they finished 22-60, and maybe don't read into all 60 of those losses because in the end of that season, near the end, it was kind of in a tank mode for a team that battled a ton of injuries.
Yeah, that you mentioned it. They battled so many injuries. In fact, they were the most injured team in the NBA last year, and so the record doesn't necessarily tell you about the team. And this is a team that, they were not good with the injuries. Like, they just weren't good. They were losing a lot of basketball games. But that doesn't go without saying that there were some bright moments in there, some bright players. One being Mr. Franz Wagner, rookie last year. Yeah,
Franz, who was an all-rookie player on the all-rookie first team, which is awesome for Franz, and he was a shining light and really kind of took charge at different points in the season for Orlando. And he's a guy, this upcoming season, you want to see him improve even more just with his ability to finish at the rim. I think is going to be the biggest thing for Wagner. But overall, there's not much you can complain about. If you're a Magic fan, you have this guy, a stud of a rookie. In a season that there was a lot to forget about, he was one huge bright side for Orlando.
Yeah, and honestly, let's take it back to draft night for him. He was picked with the 8th pick, and at the time, that was actually kind of looked at as, oh, wow, they reached for him. In the mocks coming up to that draft, he was going 11, 12. That's what I saw most of. And I honestly, going into the season, was like, man, Orlando messed up big time picking Franz, and he blew us all away. He led all rookies in total points scored, not points per game, but he scored the most points. And he's 6'10", can do everything. He doesn't have a weakness to his game. He could shoot, handle, play make, and he's active on the defensive end. Just someone that I think is primed for another step. It'll be so fun to see what he can do in a sophomore season. I don't expect to see a sophomore slump. I expect to see him continue to progress with more of a role this season.
I completely agree. And even his three-point shooting was an NBA average. And as a rookie, a fan of a rookie, you have to look at that and say, hey, that is something we can build upon. I think his attacking of the rim, just getting a little bit stronger for that as well, will be huge for this upcoming season. Another rookie who maybe didn't have the season he would have wanted was Jalen Suggs, though. I know that there were a lot of people high on him, including myself. I loved him at Gonzaga, and I think this sophomore year is going to be a huge development year for a season that was riddled for injuries for Suggs.
Yeah, they have a plethora of guards. Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, just a ton of young guys that it's going to be interesting to see how they all kind of fit into the like how many minutes they all get, the depth chart, like what is it going to look like for their rotation? But yeah, Suggs, this is a big year. He was riddled with injuries. It was hard. It was hard just because he had so many expectations, had such a fun season with Gonzaga. And yeah, this season, you know, it'll be interesting to see how he fits in with those guys, where he's at with the rotation and what he can do.
Yeah, and it felt like, too, last season, Orlando had this big sticky ball, and they were just throwing it at a wall and seeing what would stick.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're doing with this backcourt of guards that they have. And they even have veteran guards, Gary Harris being one that, as a Denver Nuggets fan, I want to see Gary thrive. And he's now in that position where he's going to be a veteran leader for the Orlando Magic.
Yeah, and that just leads us into the offseason moves for them. So we could talk about the draft here in a second, but let's talk about the re-signings that they have, where they're running it back from a team that what is it,
20 games.
20 games
22.
last year. 22 games last year. For them to run it back, you would look at that and be like, what is going on in Orlando? But in my opinion, I love what they're doing there as far as they are confident in what they're building. They're willing to run it back and hope for a season of health and really to examine what they have. They re-signed Gary Harris to a 2-year deal. So that'll be good. And he does bring that veteran leadership, like you mentioned.
He does. And they not only did they re-sign Gary Harris, they re-signed Mo Bamba, they re-signed Bol.
Big boy.
Yes. And so these are all moves that say, hey, we are trying to build a culture. We are trying to establish a system under Jamal Mosley. Let's see what we can do, because Cole Anthony has shown he can start in the NBA and he can start for the Orlando Magic. Now, how is it going to look, him starting alongside the number 1 pick, Paolo Banchero?
Yeah, Paolo has shown. So let's just talk about, first of all, draft night, for them to be smoke screening the whole NBA. It was Jabari Smith or Chet the whole time. And then 15 minutes before the draft, it's ding, 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 Woj tweets that Paolo's going to be the number 1 pick. Shocked the world. And he showed why he was the number 1 pick in Summer League. They told him, hey, we've seen what we need to see. We don't want to risk injury. Let's take him out. So he's shown a lot. What they got with him is a guy that has potential to be a perennial all-star, a guy that's going to be your number 1 option on offense. That's what they need. If you can look at their rebuild, they're missing that piece. They're missing that franchise cornerstone. Can Franz be that? But I really do think with Paolo, they have a guy that has serious potential to be that for Orlando.
I completely agree. And the biggest thing is him just getting accustomed to the pace of NBA play, because Summer League, to be quite honest, it's not going to be that. You're playing a lot of different guys who are fighting for a roster spot. Maybe they're fighting for a G League spot. It's going to be those first couple of games where you're trying to get acquainted and up to speed. Oh, hey, I'm not looking at a guy who's in the G League. That's Steph Curry right in front of me. So it's moments like that will take some time, but I really do think he's going to be a guy who learns quick and is going to be awesome in Orlando. Time will only tell, but I do think he was the right pick. He's going to be a nice fit. And now it's, how do we mesh all these young guys together?
Yeah, going into next season, let's talk about what they should be looking to do. What's the expectation? Where are they going to fall? I personally think that there's 2 things they need to focus on. Number 1, finding a team identity. I said this with the Pacers. They're in the same stage of their rebuild. What is Orlando's identity? They have a lot of versatility. I feel like that's what they've looked at when they've drafted, is who are some guys that can be versatile. They have Jonathan Isaac coming back and just Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero now. What is their identity going to be? Is it going to be a team that is running the floor really well, grit and grind type team, a defensive specialist team? What's that going to look like for them? I think, number 1, find that identity. Number 2, I have a couple names circled that I want to see progress, and I want to see, let's examine what they can be. Number 1, obviously Paolo Banchero. Number 2, Franz Wagner. Let's see him take a huge step in his sophomore season. Number 3, we've already talked about it, Jalen Suggs. Where's he at? Like, how good is he? Where can he fit with this Orlando team? RJ Hampton, another one that we haven't even talked about. He played in Summer League, and quite frankly,
was disappointing in the Summer League.
he did not look good.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but, RJ Hampton, when he was moved over in that trade from Denver, the Nuggets were like, man, we're losing a really bright future in this guard. And so there is potential there in RJ Hampton, but he really hasn't shown it. So I'm glad you kind of put a big old circle on his name, because in that trade with Denver, they got RJ and Gary Harris as kind of the two bigger names, and they haven't really produced like they probably wanted them to. RJ more than Gary. Gary, I think, has had some really solid moments, but RJ Hampton was kind of this prized possession in the trade, and he hasn't stepped up to the occasion. So this is a big season for him, because, quite frankly, this is a backcourt that has a lot of potential talent, and already has talent with Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs,
Markelle Fultz. They have so many guys.
They do, and so it's like RJ Hampton has to look at this and say, hey, I have to figure out if I'm going to be sinking or swimming with this team.
They literally are the team of question marks.
They are.
You name all those guys: Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba, Bol. Like they have guys that there's so much potential, like raw potential, but like is it going to translate? We still haven't seen it. And with last year just being injury riddled, it just is so unfortunate. So this season, those two things, I said that I'm only going to do two, but I'm going to do a third: health.
Yes.
Let's make sure that they're healthy. So yeah, that's what I got.
That's the biggest part during a rebuild as well. You need your guys to stay healthy. I mean, every NBA team to win a championship, you look at past winners, it's because their team stayed relatively healthy. And that even goes during a rebuild as well. You have to figure out who the heck can play for your team, and a lot of that is who's healthy, who isn't. I like to see Orlando almost as Detroit from last season.
I love this comparison.
Yeah,
Tell me.
And yeah, let me tell you, strap in for a second. Why don't you? Yeah, that's really nice. You've got a guy like Paolo, who's going to be the role of Cade Cunningham, right? The first-year guy who has just a brilliant amount of potential.
Yeah.
And then you've got a guy like Franz Wagner, who is kind of in that Sadiq Bey role, where he has a chance to really explode on his game. And then the question marks. Detroit had a lot of that as well last year. Guys who might be able to play. They had Jeremy Grant floating around last year. And it almost feels similar in Orlando, which isn't a bad thing. In a rebuild, this is your time to figure out, hey, how do we build this core? Who do we want to center this franchise around, and go from there? If Orlando finishes, as high as 10th in the East, that's an amazing season. But realistically speaking, you're trying to figure out who to really build this team around, who you want your core to be. And by re-signing Bamba for a couple of years, Gary Harris for a couple of years, that is now giving you that length and that width to go out and figure out who the heck you want to be.
Yeah, that comparison with Detroit, it's kind of interesting. I think it could go one of two ways. Either, Detroit's young guys with Jaden Ivey now and Cade and Sadiq, they're going to explode. And even Jalen Duren, let's throw his name in there. He had a great summer league. They could either explode or they can kind of stay where, kind of where they're at and die, dwindle down. I don't expect that at all. I think those guys are great. But I personally think, and I truly believe this, I think that if the guys in Orlando can pan out, all the names that we've mentioned, all those question marks, if they can pan out and become what they potentially could be, I'd rather have this Orlando roster with how versatile they are and how, they have so many pieces. And what that can do is one of two things. You can completely keep them on your team and build and continue to foster these guys, or you can package them and trade for a superstar down the line when it's ready. I've seen a lot of things regarding Donovan Mitchell with Orlando, actually. I don't think it's quite the time yet for that, because the roster, the guys on the team aren't quite ready to make a playoff push or contend. I think you got to develop them a little bit more, and then you can enter that discussion. But truthfully, and I really mean that, I think Orlando is building something so good just with all these pieces that they have.
I completely agree. I also don't think you touch Donovan Mitchell with a 10-foot pole if you're Orlando. And I think Donovan Mitchell is phenomenal. I think he's an amazing point guard, but...
Oh, you hate him, man.
Yeah, no, I hate him. No. But it just doesn't really fit the time, like you mentioned, especially in a rebuild where some teams it's like, okay, this will put us over the top. And Orlando has these guards that who knows the potential they have. So if you're Orlando, I think you steer clear from that and you trust in this rebuild process for the guys you have because they have pieces. Now it's how do these pieces work together?
Yeah. Do you think so? Let's move into standings like record. Do you think that they can make a serious push for the play-in? Where are they at with that?
I don't think they're there yet. I think it's a season away. And that's not to say that they don't have talent. It's just who's doing what around you. I think they'll find their way climbing up the standings. But I think they're going to need another year, maybe two of development. And then you're going to start to see that push. I think Denver's another good comparison from, 2016, 2017. They got Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray's added to the equation. Then they started to add some pieces. They just missed the playoffs. Next season, they're fourth in the West. Or third in the West. Something like that could be similar for Orlando.
Scott, I think it's Franz Wagner's time.
Wow.
I think it's Paolo Banchero's time. I think now, and this is all hinged on health with this team. If this team can stay healthy, I really do think that they can make a push for the play-in, the 9th or 10th spot in the East. I think that there's teams that are all kind of at the same level, and I would put the Magic on the tier of the Pacers, on the tier of Detroit, as we mentioned.
Probably Charlotte now.
Charlotte, too, with Miles Bridges being down. And I truly do think that they can make that jump to possibly being 9 or 10 if they're healthy, and it'll be super fun to watch all these question marks as we've been calling them through this show. See what they can do. It can be a shocking team, a team that no one saw coming, the Orlando Magic.
Yeah, which would be sweet. And as you know, with questions come answers, but that comes with time. So we appreciate you all listening to this special episode. So alongside Trevor Mickulin, I'm Scott Ayers. We say so long for now, and we will see you next week.
It's Paolo time. Hey, thanks for watching. Before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're the only NBA show focused on covering your favorite small market teams. Find us on all social media platforms at Small Ball Podcast.